Hello, this is just a basic video to show you how to load a source into the WG2 display, and we'll go through basic navigation on how to navigate with that source once you've loaded it. When you start it up, you've got a main window here to the left, and you have a sources tab. This sources tab is a list of all sources in the display that you'll connect to, real time or whatever we eventually develop. Um, there's a right menu that if you click on a source name, you get disconnect, delete all sources. Now I've got a tensor archive that it automatically links to, which is just an example one, which right now is by default is put in there. We can go ahead and delete that. So I'm going to go ahead and right click and delete it. You don't have to delete it, you can leave it. It's no big deal. Now you have a local file and you want to add a local file. So you go up here to the little shopping cart that's on the source tab and click on that, and you should have an add source in there. When you click on the add source, you get a little dialog, and this dialog lets you pick the name of the source. You can give it whatever name you want, so I can call it test, and you've got a URL. Now you've got two ways of doing this. One, you could say you know where there's some data out there on the web, like you can go HTTP : and type in your path name, path to data, and .xml or whatever the location it is. And then you click validate, and it will go out and actually grab the header off that file and find out if it actually is data that it knows how to read. But we're not interested in it right now. So we're going to go to this local file button. I'm going to click on it. And when I click on it, we get a standard source dialog. And I've got a folder on my drive called KTLX large, which is an old ancient archive case. And it has a codeindex.html in it. So I'm going to go ahead and open that. And when I open it, the display basically goes out and grabs the header of it, and it just grabs the first part of it, and it says, oh, okay, this looks like, I'm pretty sure this is a WOODSY XML index. So it's got that information here. Now, since it knows it's an index, it also has a history. Now, if you're connecting to a real-time source, like on the web or an HTTP link, you might want to, you'd want to pick like the last 1,000, 5,000, or 10,000 records. This is just for the purpose of not filling up your memory. If you're running a real-time auto-updating system and it's running for 3 weeks and no one bothers to reboot it, it's especially going to fill up the memory if it's keeping every record. But for an archive case that's not auto-updating, we can just pick this archive all records. Now tell it to load everything. I'm going to click OK. Now you didn't see it, but right here with this little chain, this is showing you that it's successfully connected to the source. And down here in the source controls, you now see a list of all the products that are that's in that index. Now I can right click on it again here, and I can say disconnect, and it disappears. And I can right click and say connect, and this little chain will show a little arrow as it tries to connect, and when it's done, it'll fill in this list. Now I've got a list of products, and these are all KTLX Radar archive cases. So I'm gonna click on reflectivity, and then you'll get a list of choices, and these choices are the elevations of that product. And I'll click on, say, 0.5, and then I get a list of times. Click on a time, and we have data. Now, it's possible that if you're loading a data set that's another radar, I've centered this on Oklahoma City right now by default, but it could have been in Florida. You may have been over here and you loaded an archive case, and you won't see any data then, obviously, if you click on that. So down here in the navigator, which we'll now go over, you've got a little jump button. And if you click that guy, it will find the center of that data. It knows that it's KTLX, it knows where the radar's at, so it goes to it and fills it in. Now, to zoom in and out, you can use the mouse wheel and roll forward and backwards. This is the whirlwind window. You can also use these controls down here in the bottom left. You can pan and zoom. With a plus and minus, you can move in and out, or use the mouse wheel. You've got rotation commands here, so you can rotate by clicking the buttons with that. Or you can use the right mouse button. By holding it down, it'll allow you to, as I move back and forth, it's allowing me to rotate the screen. Most people probably won't do that very much unless you're dealing with 3D. But for panning, you can just click with the left mouse button and move around. Now this navigator here, I'll explain it real quick. Every index has things that go forward and backward in time. So we have the left arrow, which goes previous record, and the right arrow, which goes to the next record in time, but keeping the same choice that you chose here. Now for radial set data, that's going to be the elevation of your scan. So we go back in time by clicking on the left arrow, or forward in time by pushing on the front arrow. Now there's also the latest, the very absolute latest data that's in your whole set by time, and that is this arrow with the line on the end that jumps all the way to the very end. So if you want to go to the very end, you can click on it, and you'll notice that the rightmost arrow and end arrows are now grayed out because there's nothing further. If I go back one, you'll see it reappear. You can also go up and down. So right now I am at 0.5. You can see that in the navigator with a line at the top of it. It says reflectivity 0.5 and a timestamp. If I hit the up arrow, I go up in elevation. I'm now at 1.45. If I hit the 2.4, it goes up again. So you can get the basic idea. So I'm going to use the right mouse button. I'm going to basically zoom down. And there you go. There's also a loop button here that you can click, and it will turn on looping. And you might see some flickering as it loads data in, because it's multi-threaded and it tries to do everything in real time with data delay over the network. But once it's loaded in, everything should smoothly loop. And I can stop the loop by clicking that button again. I'm going to drag this window up a little bit because the default layout cut off this part, and this part is probably important if you're looking at multiple data sets. Let's say you're looking at reflectivity and you also want to look at velocity. So I'm going to go into source control and I'm going to add velocity. So I'm going to click on velocity. And it just loaded in the velocity data. You'll now notice at the bottom of the navigator, I've got reflectivity and velocity showing up in this list with subtype. These data products will time sync and try to elevation sync as much as possible. As I change, if I navigate with velocity, it'll change reflectivity to kind of match. What it does is it finds the record that is less than or equal to the timestamp, the closest one that matches the one you've got selected. So if I'm on velocity and I navigate to 18.38, with later data sets, these numbers will always match between, say, 1 moment of reflectivity and velocity, but in earlier data sets, it may not, or you may have a data set that doesn't. For instance, velocity may be at 3.8, but reflectivity is at 3.7. So when I click on this, velocity or reflectivity would move to match that velocity. This data set, the timestamps appear to be synchronized for the different products. And you'll probably never run into that. I think that covers the basics for adding a source and navigating a radial set. And I'm sure I'll update this video in the future.